name is Rory O'Toole.
And my name is Matt Schultz.
And this is How to Be,
the podcast where we discuss ancient wisdom, modern hacks, paperback self-help books, and pithy platitudes,
in the hopes of figuring out the best way to live this one precious and wild life. Today, we're talking about the Lindy Effect. Is an idea, institution, or custom valuable just because it's old? How much should ancient ways influence our modern lifestyles? Join us as we explore how the past informs our present.
Hey, Roar.
Hi, Maddie. How are ya?
You'll never guess what I finally did.
Oh my gosh. You became a Jessie White Tumbler?
I have not yet become a Jessie White Tumbler.
Exactly, not yet.
Not yet.
Maybe next week when we discuss habits, you'll get there.
I finally saw Sliding Doors.
Oh my God, Matt. You know what's funny? I recently watched Sliding Doors.
Well, we talk about it a lot. So
yeah.
I don't even know if that's a coincidence because we do talk about it.
Well, that's because the biggest contribution that movie really has is like becoming part of the cultural lexicon for the way things could have been. The alternate universe, if you hadn't tripped. If you hadn't,
oh my God.
Yeah. You know, like, oh, it's a real sliding doors moment. Though I don't think many people have seen that movie. And certainly even fewer have rewatched it since it came out.
No, in fact, I spent most of my adult life thinking it starred Sandra Bullock.
Well, she's in another alternate weird timeline movie, The Lake House, but that's neither here nor there. What'd you think?
Well, what did I think? I think I liked it.
Yeah, it's a very likable movie, but, you know, I think the most distracting thing about it is her British accent. Gwyneth's British accent doesn't really quite hit. I feel like it improves a lot by the time we get to Shakespeare in Love.
As I was watching this, I kept thinking, you know, it's a good thing that that she decided to stop acting. Good for her. She was like, not, you know, she used acting to become famous and then decided that, you know, she wants to spend her fame elsewhere. Does she still act? I feel like she hasn't acted since the 90s.
Well, the problem is that you and I are not tuned into, we're actually not tuned in at all into big box office movies because she's in all these Marvel movies and has been, or at least she's I think she's in the big casts that they do. And she was an Iron Man, all these things that you and I are like very not, I'm like, she hasn't been in anything since Shallow Hal.
Yes. Yeah. That I felt like Shallow Hal was her big swan song and that she was out. Also, like, I can't believe she was in that. Like, you know, it's just like, I think of her as so like sort of patrician and snobby that the idea of being an actress seems beneath her. Like how in the 19th century being an actress was like such low work because the real elites just didn't work.
Right, exactly. Yeah, but you know, she's in Sliding Doors. She's not making that train in one universe. She's making the train in the other. She gets a great haircut. One universe, the one where she makes the train is obviously far superior.
Yes.
She gets a great haircut. She gets a great job. She gets a new boyfriend, but she dies.
I wanted them to confirm, and then she lives in the universe with the bad haircut. I want them to confirm that she'll get the haircut, re-get the haircut in the universe in which she lives, because I feel like that's her destiny haircut.
Now that haircut looks so good on her and her gorgeous long swan neck, but nowadays that haircut has become that of, you know, Kate Gosling.
Yes.
Much maligned by the patrician community even.
Yes,
A
it has
Gwyneth
become
Paltrow
Karen.
today would never have a haircut like that.
No, but it was so gorgeous with those roses woven into it.
Oh, yes. PC.
It's a very modern haircut, and it reminded me of how the 90s were this time when we believed we were modern. We believed we had arrived to the future, and how thrilling that was for hair, for music, for fashion, for everything. It was really an exciting time.
I mean, I think every time thinks they're the future.
I am not so sure if we believe it to the same extent now.
Oh, interesting.
Like, by which I mean, you could say, like, to say it's the 90s was another way of saying, like, of course this is possible. Whereas to say it's 2022 seems to be saying, like, of course this catastrophe is possible. Whereas, like, in the 90s, it was like, oh my God, can a woman ask a man out on the date? Please, it's the 90s.
Yeah,
Like,
well, I think there's also it's 2022. How is this still happening? Is another version. Like we
yeah,
should be more progressed than we actually are.
yes, the progress, the train of progress was chugging along.
Well, the new
So,
millennium was coming up, silver, space,
yeah, chrome.
icy colors.
So I had a friend once who told me that, like, after the Truman Show came out, that, like, a lot of people were showing up to, like, therapist's office and psychiatrists saying that, like, I've got this Truman Show thing going on.
Yes.
Now,
What does that mean? That they're paranoid that they're on a TV show?
yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
I realized as I was watching this that, like,
Sliding door syndrome.
I have sliding doors syndrome.
We all do, but I think that you do to a real, I mean, oh, we all do. Like the idea of like being given the choice to stay off a plane or take a plane is like, I can't handle that.
Yeah, those crisis points
Yes.
really throw the sliding doors open, slam them shut. Now, as for the question of which of the universes is real
In the movie Sliding Doors.
in the movie Sliding Doors, so when she's running for the train, a little girl blocks her from getting on it. And there's this little twinkly, glittery sound effect. Twinkle, 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 like magic is afoot. It's the sound effect that means magic is afoot in
Mm-hmm.
90s movies. And then when it cuts to the other universe and we see that the little girl gets pulled out of the way by her mother so as to not impede Gwyneth's ingress onto the train, again, magic is afoot, another twinkly sound effect. So did something happen? Did magic happen? Did are we supposed to believe that magic happened that split the universes here? Or is the movie just showing us what if? And this is only these universes only both exist for us, the viewer. Because the magic as a foot sound effect implies that something has happened in the world to split the universes.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Is this a movie about multi universes that exist alongside each other, like infinite universes, or is there a way that it really happened and a way that it didn't happen?
Yeah.
It could have happened.
Yeah. And
They
it's
they're not
clearly
very
just a
good at
parable.
explaining. Yeah, they're not very good at explaining that. Um, at the end of the movie, of course, it ends the way most sliding doors tropes do end, which of course, like this has been since sliding doors. Has it was sliding doors like the first movie that kind of like
Well, there was that Polish movie.
that you read it was based on?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a common trope, I don't think, before this movie came out. I mean, there's like It's a Wonderful Life, which shows him what it would have been like if he hadn't been there, but it's not quite the same. But since then, this has been like done a few times. There's a famous Frasier episode we love called Sliding Frasiers. And in these sort of two different universes where you see two different stories, the protagonist always ends up in the end at the same place, right? The implication
Yes.
that you will end up where you're supposed to be, the belief in sort of like fate.
She dies in one universe and she lives in the other. Now, she sort of gets the benefits of both universes in the universe that she lives in. Like,
Yeah, in the universe she lives in, she still meets the same love interest in the exact same way
yes,
at the very end of the movie.
yes, a love interest who's not cute enough.
No, her loser boyfriend and the love interest not good looking enough for her. Kind of weird that they did that to the audience.
Yeah, it actually negatively impacted my ability to feel like connected to the story.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. Anyway,
Now, I'm not saying that everyone on TV needs to be
yes,
so
you are. That is what you're saying. You're saying everyone needs to be hot on TV. No fat people on TV. No ugly people on TV.
no uggos. No, I'm
You
just
just
saying that
want Aryan people on TV.
if you're going to cast Gwyneth Paltrow, you can't then cast
Well, it's not that he's okay. Yes, he is unattractive, but there are, it's like
unsexy.
he didn't have a charm to him.
No.
I don't know. I mean, like, I do think we need more ugly people on TV, but also we need to keep hot people on TV too, because it's escapism, isn't it?
Yeah, and also like it breaks the suspension of disbelief to believe that Gwyneth Paltrow, whose neck is 6 feet long and could encircle a man like an anaconda and
Would be with this dumpy, middle-aged, bushy-browed, pot-bellied Scottishman.
Scotsman. Yeah, can we get a hot Scotsman from the cast of Outlander, perhaps?
Yeah.
Anyways, the multiverse, not very Lindy, or perhaps the Lindiest thing of all.
Yeah, so that's what we're talking about today. Well, we're talking about ancient ways, what value they might have to us in our current modern world. And sort of more specifically, we will be referring to the Lindy Effect. And what is the Lindy Effect, Matt?
The Lindy Effect is an effect observed by these guys, these comedians who
Were
noticed
they
that,
comedians?
yeah,
Oh,
at a restaurant called, it's named for the restaurant where they first sort of threw this into the air during one of their bull sessions.
is this circa 1960 or 1920?
I think 60, more
I think
60 than
60.
20. And they said that, the best way to sort of judge if a comedian is going to have a long career is to look at how long his career has already been. Those who have been around for a while, you can sort of reliably say that they'll continue to be around. And this has been extrapolated to say that the future viability of an idea, an institution, a practice seems to be positively correlated with how long it has already lasted. So something like that's been a restaurant that's been around for 5 years, it's a safe bet to say that it'll be around for another 5. It might be a less safe bet to say that it'll be around for another 30, or that it's going to tank in the next month.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think the more longevity, basically, the longer something's been around, it'll keep staying around. So there's this guy, Paul Scholas, who's like the Lindy guy. Like he's made his whole life about Lindyism and being Lindy. And for him, and sort of what Lindyism has become because of him in the cultural zeitgeist, is something that has been around for a long time because it has endured the test of time. Perhaps that also means that it's contains more wisdom. It should be something that we should value in our society.
Yes, I'm going to put this in a rather pithy way. He has moved it from descriptive to prescriptive.
Mm.
He is promoting a Lindy way of life, but he is also the first to admit that like what that means is kind of inherently vague and well,
Like
okay,
it works in certain realms better than in others. So like for science, it doesn't work so well because things that we thought, like medical science, things that we thought, you know, bloodletting, for example,
very Lindy.
very Lindy. He wouldn't recommend bloodletting. He's not totally out of touch with reality.
Yeah, lots of
But
terrible things are Lindy.
lots of terrible.
Sexual assault, cannibalism,
Yeah, child marriage,
other horrors,
other horrors.
genocide,
Yeah, racism. Is
racism.
racism Lindy?
Um, well, race is sort of a modern concept, but hatred of the other
Very Lindy.
for whatever reason. Now, when you actually hear him talk about it, he puts a sort of different emphasis on it, where and this is where I can more get behind it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much do what is Lindy, it's raise an eyebrow at what is not Lindy.
Mm-hmm.
So a book comes out and it's a new diet and everyone's doing the diet and it's like only eat for your blood type is sort of my go-to example of something that just feels so like terribly modern. And he's like, put a little space between yourself and just jumping on the bandwagon. And one way to do this is to like sort of have this Lindy perspective, this like you the timeline is long in your eyes. Like, I was doing some Torah study with my neighbor the other day, and I made some observation about the text, and I was like, well, isn't it true that like there's sort of this preoccupation in Jewish thought with X? And he was like, well, not really. I mean, maybe for the past 300 years, and
Yeah. Well, I mean, this brings up a very interesting point of like, how long is a long time?
yeah.
Because I was talking to my mom. I was like, oh, we're doing a podcast on ancient ways. And she was like, how ancient? Druids? Abraham? Egypt?
Well, I think it's proportional. It's like there's Lindy, there's deep Lindy.
Mm.
He's like coffee's Lindy, tea is deep Lindy. Like things are different. But I think what the thing about my neighbor saying like 300 years ago is recent. Like it can be helpful to have a long view of history and to remember that like to not be so consumed with the present that you lose perspective and jump on bandwagons like a kook.
Yeah, I mean, and I think this speaks to just and something all modern people seem to do today. And like you and I have had to really like talk ourselves down from a few ledges of being so committed to a modern lens of the world that we work ourselves up into a tizzy, thinking that the way we view the world or interpret things, it has some objectivity to it.
It pisses me off so much. People these days love to point out that like this is a construct, that's a construct, everything's a construct, but our own 2022 constructs, we truly think that like things have acquired their definite form. This is how we're going to see things for the rest of eternity.
Exactly.
These are the categories that we're going to use to like discuss things for the rest of eternity. And these lenses, I mean, yeah, lens theory, I would call it, because this is like a field of discourse in your and my conversation.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what our podcast is. It's lens theory.
It's lens theory. Yeah. Looking through this lens, looking through that lens. And I think the Lindy lens at its best, I wouldn't recommend putting on Lindy as a lens, but rather using Lindy to question the lens of presentism. Because I think
absolutely.
Lindy as a lens actually doesn't work very well, because like just because something is old it really has no bearing on its quality, and to evaluate whether or not something being old will not help you evaluate as good or bad. You will need to bring in your other critical criteria to make that evaluation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it has more of a bearing on if something will last. But even the Ottoman Empire fell.
Even the Ottoman Empire fell, and that was pretty
600
when.
years. It's pretty long for an empire.
Yeah. Yes.
Even dinosaurs became extinct. How long were they on Earth? Thousands of years?
More than thousands, I think.
Millions of years?
Well, they were around
Let me Google this. How
65
long?
million years ago, and I think they were around from 65 to like 100 million years ago. So I think they're around for like 40 million years. Does that
Oh
make sense?
my God. You won't believe it. How long
Tell
we've been
me.
on Earth. You can't even conceive of this amount of time.
60 million years?
Dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago. That's probably where you got
Okay.
65 from. After living on Earth about 165 million years.
Wow. That
That is
is
so Lindy. They never
oh,
thought they were going to die. It
no.
really
And here
puts human time and our obsession with how long we're going to last and how we're going to preserve ourselves into extreme perspective.
I know. Well, I don't think we're pacing ourselves very well because we changed, like, if you think about how much our society has like changed in 2000 years, it's like we are not pacing ourselves for a 160 million year span.
No. Well, yeah, we're not a slow burn. We're not doing a slow burn like the dinos.
Yeah, yeah, this is
I mean, so much has happened in the last 100 years. I mean, since 150, post-industrial revolution and on is just like,
I know. I moved to Israel. I came back. I started grad school. It's been nuts on planet Earth. I became a vegan. I quit smoking. The Earth can't handle it. I have to make a plug here right now for on Apple TV Prehistoric Planet. If you want to feel wonder about the
mhm.
planet we live on, it's narrated by Dave Attenborough. It is a Planet Earth style documentary, but with digitally animated dinosaurs that are so realistic that you really feel like you're just watching a nature documentary. And you see there's something especially about the sight of pterodactyls in the sky that's like you really ah it was a world with different creatures. It was this world but with different creatures.
For 165, like the Earth is so much more used to dinosaurs than us. Like they're like, who are these? The Earth is like, what are these newcomers? We're just getting to know each other.
Yeah, it really knows these like bird monsters quite well because we still have them too.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you want to watch Apple TV Plus, you want to watch this on Apple TV Plus, but don't have a login, just get in touch with Matt's brother, Zach, Brothy Schultz. He provides logins for all the lost brothies of the world.
Exactly. Username Brothy Schultz at gmail.com. Password Brothy Boy. 123 exclamation point, exclamation point.
I wonder if that's a joke that your dad would consider only funny to us.
Oh yeah. The other day I was talking to my dad about the podcast and he really enjoyed the minimalism episode and said something. He quoted something we said, and then my stepmom Kristen was like, "You guys are so funny." And my dad was like, "Yeah, well, sometimes they're just talking about things that are only funny to them, but sometimes it's funny." Okay.
Woo! Burn.
Okay, Dad. It says you.
Says everyone who's listening to this podcast is nodding along, like he makes a good point. Okay, so one thing I'm a little bit sort of confused by or question Paul Scalis's sort of definition of what counts as being true to form in current day, true enough to the origins of when it came to count as Lindy. So, for example, he says yoga in its current iteration is not Lindy because, originally yoga wasn't about the positions or the asanas. It was more about the breath and the meditation. and it's been sort of corrupted by modernity and doesn't count as Lindy anymore. But at the same time, he says therapy is actually Lindy because people used to confide in their friends to get advice. And I'm like, a therapist is not your friend. Also, people are still confiding in their friends. They just added the addition of a therapist because
Yeah.
their friends are sick of hearing them talk about it.
Yeah. Well, it's like the ship of Theseus. You know, the ship of Theseus?
No.
It's this thought experiment where you take a ship and you replace one
Yes.
piece of the wood and then
Yes.
another
Yes.
piece of the wood. And then eventually you've replaced the whole thing. Is it the same ship? It's like, it's basically a question about continuity. It's like, what do we consider to be continuous with something? So, could you say that today's yoga is continuous with ancient yoga? Paul Scala says no, but somehow therapy is.
Yeah. Therapy, which is based on like a very new practice of like the psychology of the mind, which was like developed in like late 1800s, early 1900s, and is not at all the same as two friends talking about problems in their lives.
Yeah, and I actually think that like you could do this, you could switch up your continuity criteria and make a case for anything being Lindy or anything being not Lindy. You could say that like the internet is very Lindy because people have always been exchanging messages with each other. And like that was the first, just speaking across a room was the first email. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's like a very expansive definition of continuity, and using that you can get an email in like 10,000 BC.
Yeah. Or like you could say like sleep isn't very Lindy because actually people used to sleep only 3 hours at a time and now we sleep 8 hours at a time. And actually that's like different circadian rhythm than what we are or our forefathers had.
Yeah, it's a different sleep. So really, that's a big problem with this theory.
Paul, that's a big problem.
It's a big problem. You gotta if you're telling me that ancient ways are worth looking at, you need to let me know what qualifies
We
as
need
an
some
ancient way.
criteria. Yeah. He also like he obviously there's a lot of cherry picking going on, right? Because he's like he got the vaccine for COVID. Okay, so vaccines, not Lindy. But he doesn't use mouthwash because ancient Greeks didn't use mouthwash.
Yeah.
Okay, so Lindy is whatever we want it to be.
That's the thing is like really this lands you back where you started. If you like try to jump in on Lindy, it lands you back where you started. Like whatever your criteria were before hearing about Lindy for evaluating whether or not something is good to do or not good to do, you're still going to have to use those criteria. Lindy does not actually it pretends to give you new criteria,
Right.
but it doesn't, because you still have to bring your old criteria to bear on questions of like, am I going to get a vaccine, or like versus do bloodletting when you have a headache, get that bad blood out. And if it's not actually giving us new criteria to make a judgment, then what is the point? Perhaps the point is just feeling a little like putting a little feather in your cap when you feel like you're doing something very old, very Lindy, but probably it's something you would be doing anyways.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a good litmus test for something to evaluate something's value. Just because it's old means it's almost immaterial.
It's almost immaterial. You're going to have to more information required, please, about
Yeah.
whether it's good or bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, is this just a money grab for Paul Scholas?
Is this just I mean, it's kind of a fun game. Just it's kind of funny to say something's Lindy. Oh, very Lindy. Oh, very not Lindy. I kind of think that's funny. But I do think that there is I feel like there something being really old is like primordially attractive to human beings, or at least to people that we know. and certainly myself. Like, I think that you love that Judaism is an old religion. Like, you and I would never choose a new religion. Like, and I think, and that's like one of the criticisms of like many religions is like some new religion, like Scientology, something invented in the 70s, like Mormonism, 1860. I don't think so,
Yeah. Yeah.
like something being older. First of all, you can forgive its flaws more.
Absolutely. When people are like, there's nothing in the Scientology that's crazier than the Bible, I'm like, okay, let's think about who wrote these doctrines and see where we're willing to cut slack and where we're not. Because if you're writing something in the 1950s and it's flagrantly ignorant of science versus writing something in the Bronze Age and it's flagrantly ignorant of 20th century science, those are very different statements. Those are very different realities that we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Connecting with the ancient, it's very romantic. I like to, it's Outlander. It's the opening of Outlander with the women dancing with the lights around a
Yeah.
fire with flower crowns and white dresses. It's
Well,
the
this
water ceremony in Judaism, which you long to have seen at the temple.
Oh, yeah, there's this line in the Talmud. He who has not seen the water drawing ceremony in Jerusalem has not seen joy. How romantic. What must have been like. Um, Apparently it got quite like wild. Like people would
Oh,
get aroused dancing and they would have to be like shuffled off the dance floor because like they were getting a little too frisky.
it's like gay
Um,
pride.
it was, yeah, it was the original Jerusalem Pride. But yeah, you and I, we find great wonder in the past, but this is something I want to ask. Is Lindyism Lindy? By which I mean, is there anything more GM being a gross modern like us, we're all gross moderns here. Is there anything more GM than lusting after the past because we think it's more authentic? Like,
I don't know. Like, did people lust after the past before? Did they? I don't know. I truly don't know.
they
Mhm.
certainly have, but only in time periods that I would consider to be
Modern.
touched by modernity. So, like
So you're
the
saying in the year
Renaissance,
800, is that Lindy enough? Is that the year 800 wasn't craving the simplicity of the year 500?
I don't think, not to my knowledge. I mean, obviously, like the Renaissance hungered after antiquity, but the Renaissance was modern. It was, in a sense. I almost feel like modernity consists of that relationship to the past. Like that's what makes a time period modern, is this sense that history is something that happened before you.
Mm. Well, okay. I think that in our modern world, one thing that we're trying to get at when we talk about the past in these sort of idealized ways is everything that's current can feel kind of shallow, and things that are old can have depth. And I almost feel like we don't have a lot of opportunity to connect with depth in our modern worlds. No one's religious anymore besides you. No one like practices we don't live the way our parents lived. Our parents didn't live the way that their parents lived. Everyone's sort of out there creating their own rules, their own ways of living their lives. And we certainly think that they're better, and maybe in certain ways they are, but we still have this, it can feel like untethered, like there is no connection where it's lonely. There's no connection to the tradition of humanity.
Yes, I think that's a really beautiful way to put it. I think it is lonely. And I also think it's a waste of our mental, spiritual, physical resources because to inherit to inherit beliefs, traditions, um, whatever, recipes, crafts, means that you're now standing on the shoulders of people who came before you, and therefore you can see farther than they did. You can grow, like some people have done some of the work for you, which means you get to do new work. You get to progress further.
Yes. And I think you bring up a good point where I don't know if this is a controversial thing to say, and I don't even know fully how I feel about it, but we do have a tendency to dismiss whole people in the past, whole societies in the past, whole ways of being, because aspects of that person don't hold up to our modern standards of things, or and maybe not even don't hold up, like they might even be so severe that we think they're egregious, like someone like there's a great debate, I think, about if Abraham Lincoln was racist. Yes, he emancipated the slaves, but by modern times, of course he's not. Of course he's considered racist. And does that mean we should disavow him for all sorts of things? Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't take all these slave owners' names off buildings at Yale. Like, I really think that's a more than fine thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly know where I fall in that culture war about figures like Abraham Lincoln. Like, I think it's absurd the cancellation of Lincoln. I think it's absurd the presentism that we apply to the past. And we've talked about this recently. Like, I don't think we quite grasp how ungenerously the people of the future are going to look at us. We eat the meat of tortured animals, tortured and violated animals, gruesome. I hope society gets to a point where we look back on that and go, that was awful.
Well, then you get to say, "Told you so."
Yeah,
your dead
ghost,
body.
my little demon. We have consumer electronics that are
Made by
made by
slaves.
people who are essentially slaves.
Yeah, I mean, child slaves have basically milled all the chocolate we've eaten in the last 20 years.
Just our treatment of the environment. There's the
Yeah, I
list
mean, it's
goes
the
on and on.
hubris of daring to call out someone like Lincoln in the year 1860 that you in the year 2022 are not keeping you're not perfect by any, we're not perfect by any means. And we blame the times. Like I say, well, I have to have an iPhone. I can't control who's making it. We only have one precious and wild life. We can only do so much.
And you know what? We have all done less for the world in our time than Abraham Lincoln did for the world in his time. So, who are we to judge? But I had this
Oh, Christopher
conversation.
Columbus.
I'm okay if like Italian neighborhoods in Boston want to keep doing their thing with him. I don't think the rest of us need to participate.
Great. I like that. I like that too. I mean, he was a great navigator. End of list.
List. Yeah, and yeah, in Italian neighborhoods in Boston. He's a big deal, probably in every city.
Oh,
And
yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, in Chicago, I mean, at least, definitely not in LA. Um, but he did change the course of the world more than anyone. He did more in his lifetime than, but for good, we can't say.
for good. Yeah,
That's a real sliding doors. What if Christopher Columbus had never discovered the United or Americas?
I know. I think about that sometimes. I'm like, because like sometimes I can't actually believe that it's possible to cross the ocean in a wooden ship. It seems so unlikely to me that sometimes I'm like, I can't believe that they didn't like try this 3 times, have everyone never be seen or heard from again, and then go, okay,
Oh
we'll
yeah.
just make do with what's here.
Was it a one and done situation?
No, but I think I really don't
Well, of
know.
course, people debate. They say that other people did make it, like Vikings and like some African navigators. But what this isn't a podcast about Christopher Columbus and what he did and didn't do.
So I had this conversation once. I was in Germany in this very rural village. This was a number of years ago. And there was this castle. There was this castle across the street, and they did tours. It was this ancient, I don't know, Middle Ages castle. And I've always had this fascination like uh with places in historic places that aren't treated preciously. So like in Tel Aviv, there were some like ancient Roman arches that just like they're just on the street and you just pass them and someone spray painted on them. Or in Naples, these medieval street structures and buildings that are just filled with trash, versus like in a place like Rome where everything is made into a living museum, or not living museum. It's like a dead museum. And I feel like it's very GM, very gross modern to have that posture towards history of like, I'm a person from the present looking at the Colosseum.
Like you
Versus,
feel like you're separating yourself too much from it.
yeah, versus like the
Living with
casual
it.
way that like the people in Naples just live in these ancient street structures, to the point that they just will, toss a beer bottle at an ancient wall. Um, Now, I was talking to this woman in Germany, and I made some point similar to this, where I was like, you know, oh, but were the places of history of the world left to rot and ruin? Because I would find that so much more wondrous.
Mm-hmm.
And she totally misunderstood me, what I was getting at. And she was like, I feel the same way. They should all rot and ruin and be cleared from the earth, because all of that history is colonial.
How German.
And, right? How Berlin. And I was like, me and this person, we did not, just the mere fact that I was visiting from Israel gave her pause about me. But yeah, that attitude towards history, that it should, so there's like the radical view that it should all be cleared away, which, there's the Western liberal version of that, which is like, this history is racist, this history is colonial, cleared away. There's like the radical religious version of that, the Taliban like blowing up ancient Buddhist statues
Mm-hmm.
because like they want, that's not the history they relate to.
Mm-hmm.
And that they want to suppress it. And then there's the non-radical version, which is just like the complete disinterest, which I think is probably the most common.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with having, buildings named after slave owners and statues of Columbus all over the place, and why it upsets people, is just because how we have been taught telling history for so long has been so inaccurate. Well, I can only speak to like American history, right? In the sort of passive way we talk about slavery and not really having equilibrium for who we revere and who we forget.
Yeah, but this like the act of clearing away, like in
It,
this to me is like what the Lindy skepticism is about. Like, don't get so caught up in 2022. Like, don't get so caught up in what
yeah,
year it is, and reframe your entire like relationship to reality around whatever's going on in like on social media in this particular second.
how can we look at history actually more broadly,
Yeah.
and like with actually doing it with more a more critical eye that is actually would be very beneficial for all of us. I don't even
Yeah.
know if we can understand all the things that have happened in the world, though.
Let's look at the lenses, though. Let's do a study of lenses. Why do Italians want to use this lens for Columbus? Why, let's look at the history of Columbi, the different,
Mm-hmm.
how each generation and population has constructed this man's memory differently, and for what purposes and what ends.
Yeah, Columbus is interesting because I had no idea it was an Italian centric holiday until I was an adult.
Yeah, nor did I actually. It's because we're
It's
not
not like
Italian.
St. Patrick's Day, which is right in your face.
Yeah, that's true. When are we going to cancel St. Patrick?
Yeah, I mean, chasing snakes out of the whole country.
Yeah, like wreaking havoc on the biodiversity of Ireland. Um, so I think that it is like I like to picture sometimes with diet crazes, I like to picture a brand new cookbook, not cookbook, diet book, like new philosophy of food. And it's shiny and it's new and it feels like the science is current. Picture it in 30 years in a used bookstore. Who would ever buy a diet book at a used bookstore from 30 years ago? No one ever would because we would just assume that that information is outdated. So, why are we so eager? It's like we keep thinking that the problem of eating is going to be solved in a definitive way. It's like it never will. So, just eat pasta and vegetables and soup.
Yeah, I mean, eating's a really interesting one because I think the ancients, or at least in the modern day, the ancient ways have come back in so many iterations. Like eat like a hunter and gatherer, eat like a paleo, eat like the caveman did. And it's all utter misery because it doesn't align with our modern lifestyle.
Sure.
It's interesting because we aren't cavemen, so I don't know why we would be eating like them. It's like the idea that our bodies don't know that we're not cavemen anymore and can't process potatoes.
Yeah. No, it seems rather absurd to me. It seems very GM. And like, I hate like so this like the human origins, like the hunter-gatherer human, like on the Tahandra.
Tundra,
What am I thinking of with Tahandra?
Sahara,
Sahara,
Sahara.
Serengeti. So like I picture it like it's this like a display in the Museum of Natural History in New York. Like it looks this picture we have in our heads of the human origins.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually like incredibly cheap. It's a cheap looking set if we actually examine it. And we're always like literally like every book about like OCD or CBT or anxiety that I've read many of are like in the past, your brain needed to be on the lookout for threats because that rumble in the bush could be a hungry lion waiting to eat you.
Yes, yes.
Now, when you see your ex at a party, your brain thinks it's a hungry lion. And it's like, this is so, it's just so cheap. And it's such a cheap set. And I don't like how it cheapens the human experience. I just
Yes,
don't like it.
100%. Another way that it always comes up is like monogamy. Like, well, monogamy isn't natural,
Oh,
that cavemen weren't monogamous. It's like, well, do you know what isn't natural? Anything we do in this world. We use money, which isn't natural. We
ask for
bathe
consent.
in warm showers. We ask for consent. We use toilet paper.
Well, yeah, I mean, Sam Harris in The Moral Landscape, which I'm reading, talks about how, like, really any number of to say that something was selected for to be a natural behavior also has no bearing on whether or not we consider it moral. And we get confused about this with some issues, like our discussions about monogamy. I'm not saying that one needs to be either monogamous or non-monogamous, but this idea that the morality of the thing can be discerned by its naturalness or not naturalness.
Yeah, like as if it's again, like I don't have a dog in the fight with monogamy versus non-monogamy, but saying that we humans can't do it because as cavemen men were meant to spread their seed is has no relevancy in the way that we are talking about today's world.
Yeah, like, also like all these other horrible things were are natural to us, like bitter jealousy, rage, some sort of like, violence, like, it being natural.
Exactly.
But you know what really bothers me about the monogamy debate?
No, I don't.
I'm going to tell you, and it just came up today in a clip from The View that I was watching where they were discussing something Lizzo said about monogamy. Okay. She's in a long-term relationship, and she said that she doesn't want any rules in her relationship. And even like polyamorous relationships, as they're traditionally conceived, have too many rules. You can sleep with this type of person on this day. No, no rules. I'm not worried about you sexually with other people. I'm not worried about you romantically with other people. I'm focused on you. Okay. My focus is on you. That's what I'm about, not about what's going on. So, and then obviously Sunny Hostin is like, I don't know. I think like there is no love without some boundaries. And greatly annoys me about this debate is that no one can just admit that it's their preference.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone needs to frame it as like, if you're monogamous, it's because you've unthinkingly bought into social constructs that are stupid and oppressive, and you're jealous, and you don't understand that love is not a
Absolutely. You're a less evolved, less progressive person who's sort of like stuck in ancient ways in a bad way. Or,
yeah,
in the patriarchy.
or the other way, which is to say like, if you are polyamorous or non-monogamous, that's because you can't commit and you don't understand commitment, and you're a GM, and your relationship is doesn't have boundaries. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
the truth of the matter is that some people, it's literally just a preference. It's like an ice cream flavor. No one is going to really make that choice. Well, actually, people do make that choice based on moral preferences, and I think it's a shame when people make that choice based on moral preferences versus what they actually desire. When people like push
Well, more
themselves,
like more like values, not morals.
yeah, like push themselves into a polyamorous thing that like immiserates them, or push
Yeah.
themselves into a monogamous thing that immiserates them. That makes me bummed out.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure if we thought about it, we could think of other examples where people like try too hard to like put their money where their mouth is with their modern values or ancient values. And it just ends up like destroying the quality of your life.
Well, let me say this. Okay. I can't
Okay.
believe it. I'm going to dare say this. But after going to the doctor today, Roar, and seeing my consistently weird levels of certain vitamins, I'm like, should I just eat fish?
Hmm.
Just throwing it
But
out there. Not looking for an answer right now. Just throwing it out there.
by throwing it out there, you know what you're going to have.
Opinions.
Now, especially like your friends who are not vegan are going to be
Right.
like,
Over.
yeah, like, yeah, well, you said that your vitamins weren't right that one time. So you're admitting, I find that like the vegan, non-vegan debate is very tense on both sides. Like obviously vegans, like there's this moral high ground that you have, and you definitely have it. Like you feel it. You referenced it earlier.
That's why I'm concerned about introducing fish back into my diet, because I would have to give up on this smug sense of moral superiority I feel, which I've come to enjoy so much.
Yeah, and non-vegans really feel that, and they're like, and I think as a non-vegan myself, a meat eater, I feel like guilty for eating meat because it's conscience. You probably do feel like a level of guilt about it. And so being faced with that is kind of difficult, but I think I do a pretty good job of supporting you on your journey.
You do.
I don't
Well,
I don't get defensive, I don't think. I
no,
think we as
me.
meat eaters need to accept that you are dealing with a level of guilt. And vegans need to accept that they are self-righteous.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because we're right. But we're, draining our blood of vitamin D and vitamin B in pursuit of this righteousness. Um, so Roar, is Is Lindyism the way to go?
Oh, I would say no, don't do something because it's ancient. Don't think something because it's ancient. But I would say be skeptical of new things in a healthy way. Don't become such a zealot, really about anything.
Yeah. And remember that the people of the past were real, that they lived here, that their lives were rich and vital and full of juice, just like ours. And learn from them, have some perspective, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Be interested in the riches of the past, be mystified by the
Mm-hmm.
fact that dinosaurs were here for 160 million years.
Yeah, let that make you feel small.
Yeah.
Let that into your heart. I also want to say thank you to all of our listeners, not just Matt's dad and brother, but everyone who's been listening. It's so nice. And we're very grateful. And if you could like and subscribe, that would be very helpful for us. If you could rate the podcast, also very helpful. And dare I say, even share with friends.
Share with friends, spread the word, help us become Lindy.
Great point, Matt. Well, thanks for another thrilling conversation.
Goodbye, Roar.
Bye-bye.